All right, that's it from me. Monica, over to you.
Thank you very much, Arthur. And everyone, welcome to this joint webinar with SPNL and WISTA UK, where we continue our series of talking to women in different maritime sectors. So we started with talking to women on board. We met Captain Jessica Tyson then. We continued to meet women naval architects. We met Maria then. And today we're moving on to meet women in another very interesting sector, women in ports. So we're excited today to introduce you to Nikki Brown and Lucy, who will join us hopefully very shortly. So let's just give you a bit of a background before we jump into meeting Lucy and chatting with her. We're all aware, I mean, all of us are from the industry, so we're very well aware that ports and the wider maritime industry are key pillars of the global economy and the lifeblood of international trade. They support the complex supply chain that really gives us the lifestyle that we're used to today. Shrimps from everywhere, kiwi, avocados, we have them at our beck and call. I even get mangoes in London in summer. So that all comes via our lifeblood, the ports and the maritime sector. So we looked into figures that all of us know, which is indeed that seafarers are only 2% of women worldwide. Figures are slightly better in UK. Can you guess what they are, Nikki? The UK figures. I'll ask the entire room, but sorry, just
shoreside or at sea.
So it's at sea. So the UK figures are
maybe around 3%.
Absolutely. So UK is better, but it's 3% of women on board. But as we discussed, shoreside is much better. It's almost equal. But then you do a bit of a deeper dive and you find that 60% are junior roles and just 5% is at an exec level. But today we're very lucky because we have with us that rarefied air of women, the 5% at the exec level in maritime onshore. And our first speaker today is Nikki Brown. So Nikki Brown is the People Communications and Sustainability Director at Shoreham Port. She's been working for a decade in maritime from HR to operations. She's chair of the British Ports Association HR and Employment Network, a member of Diversity in Maritime, and of course, the WISTA member. So welcome, Lucy. We're very happy. Welcome, Nikki. We're very happy to have you.
Thank you very much.
Please correct me if I get the names wrong. It's not
Lucy is actually my middle name, so I do respond to both.
Oh, wonderful. That makes it easier because we're waiting for Lucy to join us. And I keep seeing messages saying she's joining us. So my brain is in overdrive mode. So Nikki, a bit of background about you. It seems you went from agriculture to maritime. Would you like to tell us a bit about your journey in Shoreham Port and how you joined and how you moved from land kind of to the sea?
Of course, yes. So my journey started about 11 years ago. So I wasn't looking to get into shipping specifically, but I relocated to the South Coast and I found an opportunity to join Shoreham Port. And I mean, the rest is history, really. I've been there for almost 11 years now, which I can hardly believe. I started off in communications at the port, and as I'd worked in agriculture before, even though the industries are very different, there are parts of the agriculture sector that are very industrial, so it was pretty straightforward transferring my skills over to maritime. I then branched into HR, and over time I became chartered in HR, and both the communications and the HR roles gave me the opportunity to talk to loads of different people, both in the port but in the maritime sector generally. And it really fueled my fire and my interest in maritime because I got to see how many interesting roles there are all across the sector. So next step, I spent 6 months running our operations division last year. So that was completely different again, nothing like HR and communications, but I absolutely loved it. So that got me closer to a different part of life in ports. And now I find myself back running HR and communications and also sustainability. So it's fair to say it's a varied role. No 2 days are ever the same, but that's exactly the way I like it. So who knows where I'll be 11 years from now, but I've certainly enjoyed the journey I've been on so far.
Well, I hope you're still in the maritime sector.
Oh, I'm sure I will be.
But interesting that you went from communications to HR to operations. So what did you cover in operations? Can you tell us a bit about what your role entailed in operations?
Yeah, of course. So I was there for 6 months. It was a secondment covering a colleague of mine that was on maternity leave. And a huge part of the role was leadership and running a really large team. So that was something that I felt well versed in, having I led teams in communications and HR and spent a lot of time around people. So actually it was a pretty logical step, leading a large team in operations. We have lots of different cargoes that come in and out of the port. So the operations team, they're responsible for making sure we have a smooth process of cargoes coming in, going from ship to shore and then reaching our customers in an efficient fashion. So it's a very fast-paced environment. Definitely when you're busy, you're really busy and you can feel the pressure. But I worked with some really amazing people who were experts in their field, and it just got me into some slightly different areas of the port. So I really enjoyed it.
Very interesting. I was going to ask you more. Have you seen a change in the last 10 years in the ports? You've been 11 years, a decade, more than a decade now. Have you seen a big change in the way it operates, or things have changed, or even however you want to talk about change?
Yes, I have seen a change. I don't think it's been a rapid change, but I do think that slowly and surely ports and maritime generally, I think it's becoming more diverse. I think it's becoming more open and more innovative, but it's definitely a slow change. It's nothing rapid that I've witnessed in the last few years. The other thing that I think has really changed in the last 12 months is that I think that COVID and Brexit in particular have really highlighted the role of ports and the maritime sector in keeping the country moving. And I think there is so much better awareness of the role that they play. And I think that can only be a good thing for attracting new people into the sector and for general career awareness.
No, indeed, everybody's talking about ports now. I think Brexit has been a big...
Oh yeah, huge catalyst. And I think COVID as well, you know, an understanding of where the commodities that come into the UK, where they come from, how they get there. I don't think that was really understood before. I think it was just a bit of a mystery that these goods just ended up on the shelves. And actually, I think ports in particular, I think really came into the limelight throughout the pandemic when people needed to get hold of goods that they couldn't. So I think the 12 months that's just gone by, I think has been really powerful for people understanding what happens in a port and what happens in the maritime sector.
Yes, suddenly, and a few incidents around the world, or rather one that happened suddenly in the Suez, and suddenly everyone sees a different fact of maritime.
Definitely.
So I was going to ask you, is there anything in particular you enjoy about your role? You said the fast-paced nature, you said, you know, you've done different roles. Is there anything else that you could talk about in ports that would kind of show your interest in it or your enjoyment of it?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think the thing for me, which hopefully has shone through in my journey, is the sheer variety. And I don't think that's unique to me. I think that is something that everybody I speak to in the port and in the sector, it's so varied. And that's certainly what's held my interest. And to give an example of that, a couple of years ago, I boarded a pilot cutter at work and we went out to sea. We then climbed the pilot ladder onto a pretty large vessel, so that I got the opportunity to watch the pilot master exchange before the vessel came back into the port, which was an amazing experience. Really enjoyed it. But then quick turnaround, back into the office, PPE off, and I was on the train up to London to a drinks reception for what was the Women in Maritime Task Force, meeting loads of people, not just in ports, but maritime. And I remember going home that evening thinking, what a day. That couldn't have been more different, the way the day started and the way the day ended. And that's really not that uncommon. I mean, I can't remember what I did on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday that week, but I'm sure it would have all been quite different. And I think that's ports for you, that's maritime. There's always something going on. It's always exciting. Ports are living, breathing entities. You know, it's not just this static environment. So it keeps it interesting.
Well, that is indeed true. So, since you've already mentioned women in maritime, let me ask you what are the prospects for women coming into the industry? And Lucy, I'll ask you this also going forward from your side. But what are the prospects? Have you seen an increase in women applying? Have you seen an increase in the number of women in different positions?
Yeah, I've definitely seen an increase. I mean, I can go off our own data. The past 2-3 years, we've seen a real increase in the interest in women applying to work for us. And I think that's probably because we've really increased what we're doing because we want to attract more women to work for us. But I hope it's also a case that interest is just increasing. And, you know, we haven't seen the effects yet of COVID and Brexit for raising the profile of ports and maritime, but I hope that will have a really positive impact and more people, both men and women, will want to work in this sector. I think to answer your question, the prospects I think are fantastic. I think the whole sector has such a breadth of opportunity that I think you would struggle to find many other sectors that offer you so many possible avenues and career opportunities.
And what advice would you offer others who want to join? Say if people come up to you or they're listening to this webinar and they want to join, what advice would you give them? Where would you advise them to go? How would you advise them to start?
So I would give a few pieces of advice. Number one, I would say network. So, you know, you're only as good as the people around you. And I've met some really incredible women, but also some amazing male allies at various networking events. And I think the more you throw yourself into things and the more you immerse yourself, the more you can make the most of the sector because it's very sociable, very friendly. So I think certainly first piece of advice I would say is get out there and get networking. My second piece of advice would be to get a mentor. It's something that I have done and I found it really helpful for building confidence and getting a different perspective on certain things. So I would really encourage people, if you can, to get a mentor. I think it's really fantastic for your development. Third piece of advice would be to call it out. So if you see something that doesn't look right, doesn't feel right, I think don't suffer in silence, don't let it go. You know, if we're going to make this sector better, we've all got to pull together and be more vocal. So certainly call it out if you see something that shouldn't be tolerated. And final piece of advice, obviously I'm biased, but I would say join WISTA, join Diversity in Maritime, get yourself into those networks because that's your opportunity to help shape the sector and to help see how it's going to be tomorrow. So get involved in those networks because I think that's been brilliant for me. So definitely an advocate for that.
Thank you, Lucy. I would also mention join SPNL if you're networking, because they are our co-hosts also. So I think all of these networks also work. But yeah, WISTA, SPNL, Women in Maritime Task Force, indeed. So thank you very much, Nikki, for your views. We'll come back to you for a bigger panel at the end. And we see that Lucy has joined us. Lucy, thank you so much for jumping in immediately after your last meeting.
No problem. I was there all the time, but I just wasn't visible. I could see you all saying, you're joining. I'm thinking, I'm here. But there we go. Story of my life. Story of my life.
Yeah, story of all of our lives. We're all waiting in the wings, and now, you know, you get your spotlight. So thank you, Lucy, for joining us. So we have Lucy, who is the chair of the Port of Tyne. Lucy has read PEE at Oxford University, studied for an MBA, and also completed an MSc in Forensic Psychology and Criminology. So Lucy, before we move on further, forensic psychology and criminology, you want to tell us why and how that happened?
Sure. It actually builds on a point that Nikki made. So I spent 12 years working in a voluntary capacity in 2 prisons, one a high security prison and one a young offenders institution. And actually that was probably the single best personal development experience of my life, not just my career, of my life. And having done some practical stuff about dealing with mass murderers and paedophiles and people who nick cars, I thought it would be really interesting to look at the theory, the academic theory. So I did it genuinely to see what was the theory around criminology, what was the theory around forensic psychology. I think I upset my tutors quite a bit because I'd trot out the theory and I'd say, but in real life, this is what happens. And they didn't always like that. But that's why I did the degree.
I can imagine you in your chair at the board also asking difficult questions, Lucy. So like, why?
Actually, again, that picks up on one of Nikki's points. Nikki described it as calling it out.
Yeah.
ask a question. If something doesn't feel right, or even if it feels brilliant, ask why. Why is that working really well? Why didn't that happen? Why did so-and-so leave? Why did so-and-so not choose to join us? Why did that? Because, and actually that is the job of a non-exec, constantly just ask questions. If you're curious and inquisitive, first of all, you're showing an interest, which it's infectious and others will pick up on it. But also it's a core job of a non-executive director to ask why, because it gets the other people thinking differently. And so I would say the most important thing you can do for your own development is keep asking questions.
Yeah, curiosity gets you very far. I think that would be the advice that.
And also, you can't be angry when you ask a question, and someone can't be angry with you either. Don't be scared to say, my colleagues will tell you, phrase I use quite a lot is, can I just check I've understood? Are you telling me A, B, and C? A summary is a really powerful way of making the other person think. A question is never aggressive, never defensive. A question is simply a question. So ask them. And certainly we've just started a graduate scheme, literally this last week at Port of Tyne, and we've got 2 who've started. We're having 7 this year. 2 started last week. And my chief exec and I, when we spoke at the end of last week, he said it's brilliant. They've been here one day, they've had a cup of coffee with me, and they're already bombarding me with questions, several of which had to make me stop and think. That's what you want. You want to make other people stop and think, because then they'll make better decisions. So whether you call it calling out, whether you say stop the job, whether you say asking questions, whether you say be curious, just keep asking questions.
Yeah, I'm going to take you back to the beginning of it. I kind of feel like now I need to ask you more questions that make me stop and think. But let's start with something that hopefully you can answer easily. You are now the chair at the Port of Tyne. But before that, you've had a number of board positions and chair roles. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about what you did and how that brought you to maritime? Because Nicky's been in maritime for a decade, but you have admittedly been there a little less than Nicky. So do you want to tell us about your journey into maritime?
Sure. So I've been in maritime now 3 and a bit years. I went in straight as the chair of the Port of Tyne. So my background is in understanding step change in organizations, whether that's cultural change, scale change, and so on. And that's born of my original training in venture capital, and then subsequently in sort of corporate mergers and acquisitions, and then in some headhunting. So I've spent my whole career analyzing what makes a business tick, the 2 or 3 key things that make it successful, looking at the people that are running those businesses and trying to assess how to make them perform even better. And that's never about money. It's very rarely about their job spec. It's all about getting them to think differently, getting them to have confidence in themselves and so on. And also moving the jigsaws around, moving the pieces around, working out not just how an individual operates, but how do 2 people together operate, or how does a team function? How do you get the best out of A, B, and C together? Which may be better than A and B, or B and C. And so that's what I've spent my whole career doing. So some of that requires sort of business discipline, financial rigor, commercial acumen, some analytical skills. A lot of that requires, modern parlance, emotional intelligence, and EQ, and thinking about people. And also, I would say it requires a huge amount of curiosity, inquisitiveness, and desire to see both organizations flourish and be everything they can be, but also the individuals within those organizations flourish and be everything they can be. And this is where I'm going to upset you all. There is nothing special about maritime. Nothing. Maritime is a group of people doing certain things. A supermarket is a group of people doing certain things. A football crowd is a group of people doing certain things. The certain things is different, but a group of people with a focus, a purpose, that's common. And I think one of my challenges to maritime is it thinks it's special and different, and therefore somehow you have special working conditions, or somehow you have to spend longer training to do something than you do in other industries, or somehow you can't transfer from being offshore to being onshore, or somehow you can't leap into maritime from another sector? Rubbish, absolute codswallop. You can teach people the technical bits about what's special about maritime. You can teach them that. You can't teach them how to be honest, how to have integrity, how to have enthusiasm, how to, you can advance their team skills, you can advance their EQ, but you can't give them the basics of those things. But every organization needs, if you want good people, they're the raw materials that you want. It's why apprentices and why graduates are so important in every kind of organization. They come full to the brim of all of those human qualities. And then we knock them out of them by telling them somehow they have to bash metal for 4 years, or they have to do sea time for God knows how long to even merit being able to manage or coordinate someone else's activity. Absolute rubbish, absolute rubbish. And that speaks to Nikki's point about sometimes maritime is slow and behind. And I wish it would embrace the fact that it has all of those excitements that Nikki talked about, all the variety, the mixture of practical and theory, the fact that you are genuinely making a difference to people's lives. Half the UK's tea comes through the port of Tyne. You and I would not be sitting here today were it not for the port of Tyne. And the same for Shoreham and so on. And that's the bit that's exciting. That's the bit we have to talk about. Stop talking about sea time, stop talking about bashing metal, stop talking about what kind of crane wattage you've got, or and dare I say it, even some of the real technical things around not just bits of kit but shift working and things like that. If you want a diverse workforce, stop working shifts that go from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. Understand that a big chunk of certainly the Western democracies, their societies are full of middle-aged people with responsibilities for elderly parents and responsibilities for children. We now have what we call the school shift at the Port of Tyne. That's not its official time, but the school shift. People who will drop their children off at school and then come and work and then go and pick their children up from school. Guess what? Most people on that shift are actually looking after elderly relatives, not looking after children at all. But those work hours suit that lifestyle as well. So it's about people. It's always, always, always about people.
So interesting. I completely agree with everything you say. It breaks my heart to say shipping is not that special, but I get your point. I don't know, because you've come fairly newish into the industry. Like my father was a sailor, so I feel like I've been in shipping from the time I was born. So I've always thought of it as special. But you've now seen different industries and come in. Of course, you say there's nothing special. But is there anything that you'd say shipping needs to catch up on it, or is so different from maybe the financial world that you've come from, or the mergers and acquisition world that you've come from? Something that you spot, it's slow. Other than that,
well, no, I think it's the fact that it does hang on to all the technical aspects of it, rather than embrace what makes it not special, but what makes every organization special, which is how do you galvanize the people in the team to be the best they can be at doing what their organization is seeking to achieve. So instead of fixating on the idea that what makes a great shipping line are the ships, or what makes a great port are the cranes they've got, or the river they've got, or the quayside they've got. What makes any great human organization is the human beings in it. That's what makes it great. And that's the bit that I think shipping could and should focus, and maritime generally. It's why I've agreed to be on the UK Maritime Skills Commission and why I was on the Maritime 2050 task force. The real special thing about it is the people in it. And again, Nikki's point about it's a friendly industry, it's a collaborative industry. You can't load and unload cargoes without behaving in a team. It's more like rugby than football. No one person can be successful in a port. It takes a whole team to be successful in a port. And that's hugely attractive to a lot of human beings who love working in teams. So I think the key thing is maritime needs to embrace the idea that it needs great people. And it's not per se that it's maritime. It's if you offer a great environment in which people can flourish and grow and be everything they can be, they will get excited about maritime.
That's true. So can I turn it a little bit more and ask you, is there anything you've enjoyed about being in maritime? Is there something you've seen and loved about it? And And then I'll move on to our question.
Absolutely, loads. You know, I wouldn't have done it unless I felt I was passionate about it and curious and interested. Like Nikki said earlier, ports make a difference to people's lives. You know, 1 in 8 of the UK lights go on as a result of the Port of Tyne bringing in wood pellet that fires 2 major power stations. I am thrilled that 300 people at the Port of Tyne help keep 1 in 8 lights on in the United Kingdom. I am thrilled that half the UK's tea comes through the Port of Tyne. It is lovely and exciting to work in an environment where you are dealing with tides, weather. The beast from the east, we stayed open when most northern ports on the east coast were shut. Why did we stay open? Was it that our weather was less bad in the beast of the east? There was a bit of that. There was a bit of luck. There was a bit of the geography worked well for us. But principally, it's because our team worked out how to do it safely, how to get the ships in, look after them, look after the sailors, and do their job. So again, I come back to, and if you can be part of making a team even better than it already is, that's the biggest reward going, as far as I'm concerned. And if I made a small contribution to 300 people enjoying their job more, wanting to come to work, being proud to work at the Port of Tyne, if I've made a few more people in the northeast of England appreciate and understand how the Port of Tyne fits with how they want to live their lives and how it makes their lives easier, then that's plenty of reward for me. And I defy anyone not to get excited about that.
So you can see actual results. You're making a difference in people's lives, and you can bring about innovation and change. And there's lots of scope to bring that about, as you have pointed out. So, okay, that's what you enjoy, which is nice. So do you, we think of maritime as being a very male-dominated industry in our heads. Is that what your experience is? Now, is that what you see? Do you face any challenges of being a female working in a port?
So I always find this question really hard, really hard, because probably because I was brought up to be everything I could be. And I have 2 brothers, and my mum and dad had 3 children. 1 happened to be female. They still wanted me to be everything I could be. And what I see around me and what I've experienced in life is that. Now, it could be that I'm insensitive and I haven't spotted things, but I would turn it round and I would encourage people to stop wanting to, you know, be like the men. Use the things that you have going for you as a woman. Use the things that may or may not be because you've got 2 X chromosomes rather than an X and a Y, and choose an environment in which you feel you can flourish and grow. And where you think you are experiencing some form of prejudice because of your gender, ask questions, call it out, as Nikki said earlier. But the same applies to all sorts of things. It applies not just to all the protected characteristics of age, sexuality, gender, you know, et cetera, et cetera. It's individual people, and any group becomes a clique. The challenge actually for a leader like me is I need to make the port accessible for people, all people, so that I have as much diversity of talent in the port as possible, because I know that a more diverse group comes up with better solutions, better answers, and better ways of working. So my job as a leader is to keep the doors open to everybody. I would suggest that actually that's everybody's responsibility. And you won't do it simply by having quotas, and you won't do it simply by, if you like, girls doing boys' jobs and boys doing girls' jobs. It's about embracing the idea that there's a whole range of skills, method of mind, abilities, personalities, approaches that any high-performing team needs, and a port is no different from any other high-performing team. And you need to embrace what each of those individuals can bring, and collectively the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So and the other thing that I think is changing, and that is a leadership challenge, is as technology moves, the skills that are the specific skills that are required are changing. And let me give you an example that doesn't come from shipping but is allied. Lorry drivers, the key skill of lorry drivers is communication with collecting the product and then delivering the product. So when you talk to hauliers, they want people who've got communication skills. And that's because all lorries have got power assisted steering, they've got sat nav, and provided you've got a driving license, pretty much you're okay, and automated, you know, racking and all that kind of stuff. Why aren't there women truck drivers? Partly history, that you had to be stronger to wheel a truck because there wasn't power assisted steering and so on. But actually the fundamental one, I learned this recently, particularly on short distance, not on long distance, on short distance, is that there are no lay-bys or CAFs that have a toilet. So women are out driving a truck and they can't go to the loo. And a lot of customers won't allow a truck driver to go to the loo. Now, the country is unlikely to go and build loads of female loos in lay-bys around the country. So there is a campaign to encourage industrial businesses to allow a visiting truck driver to go into the building to go to the loo. Hey presto, you've solved an access issue that genuinely is because of your gender, an access issue to doing the job. There wasn't prejudice before, it was just inbuilt structural inhibition. And that's history. And we just slowly have to keep tackling these things, but tackle them not in a bang your head kind of way, in a very practical and methodical way, because as a result, you get better truck drivers, you get better customer service, your business grows, you've got a more diverse team, etc., etc.
So I think we discussed this, but Maria's asked an interesting question, saying she would be interested to hear how many women you see coming in and out of ports every day and in what roles. And I think Lucy, and she's asked some examples, and I think I'd asked you this earlier when we were chatting about, are there an increase in women crane drivers in the port, for example? So do you want to bring that in, that discussion, and also answer her question?
Yeah, sure. So in our port, we are not at 50-50. We are, and it's quite interesting where people are, and we don't have any female crane drivers. We have quite a lot of people in the warehouse. We will, as of June, half our executive leadership team will be women. In the board, there are 8 of us in the board. There are 3 women, 5 men. We've got quite, but increasingly the areas that are growing, commercial, IT, software, that kind of thing. We've got more women moving through there. I think in our 7 graduates, I think we've got 5 women and 2 men. I think that's right, but don't quote me on that. I think that's the balance. I don't see emancipation as meaning that you've got women crane drivers. If a woman wants to be a crane driver, great, super. What I want is a port that across the disciplines, irrespective of your gender, you bring your brain to work and your talent is being deployed in a way that you find motivating and rewarding and that is useful for the organization. Yes, there will be certain tasks that certain people are more predisposed to do. Partly that's their personality, partly that's their training, their education achievement level, their actual technical skill level. There's no point putting me in an IT department. I would be no use whatsoever. So putting me there simply because I'm a woman is a waste of time. Putting me there because I've got the skills and attributes and I've got the personality and I've got the communication skills that make me good in that function, great. So I worry when people make it as simplistic as, you know, emancipations come when we've got a female crane driver.
No, that's a valid point. And I think, as you said, I mean, most of the crane drive, it's becoming automated. So what you're looking at, giving more roles to women in the automation sector or the IT sector or software development, maybe that's what we should be aiming for the future.
I've got more software engineers in the port than I've got crane drivers. So I wouldn't aspire to be a crane driver if I were you. I'd aspire to be a software developer. I really would. I'd aspire to be a customer service person. We've got far more people. I'm far more interested in the customer service because how many cranes do you have, Nikki? You know, we have. It's single figures, the number of cranes. There's only ever going to be single figure crane driver jobs.
We've got 5 cranes. So yeah, it's, you know, the cranes are actually a small part of the operation.
Very small.
We have 35 to 40 forklifts that run alongside those 5 cranes, and then we've got additional labour on top of the 35 to 40 forklifts who are on the ground. So actually it's very small numbers for the crane driving specifically.
Yeah, and I certainly know we're very similar in our warehouses. We've got lots of women that drive forklift trucks and do lots of the warehousing, and we've got lots of people that do customer service who happen to be women or happen to be men. Yeah, we've got 7 cranes. So actually, if you want to develop a career in maritime, I'm not sure crane driving is the way to go about it.
There you go. Anybody who plans to join the port industry, it's not crane driving, it's software industry.
It's data. It's data. Everything is data. It's data and customer service.
Whatever you want it to be, because I mean, I think the point is there's just so many choices. So whether it's data, whether it's crane driving, forklift driving, managerial, customer services, there are so many opportunities. And I think that's what ports and maritime is brilliant at. It's the variety. So yeah, I think that's what we need to be getting across to the younger generation when we're getting into the schools. It's about the breadth of opportunities.
Yeah.
We have one
and also it is about how much of the work is automated. So raw physical human strength is not a particularly required attribute in I think any of the operations I can think we do. Careful attention to detail, ability to ask questions, confidence to stop the job, analytical skills, listening skills, communication skill, absolutely, all of those things, but not raw physical ability, which is normally seen as the distinguishing feature between males and females. That's irrelevant, completely irrelevant.
Yeah. So the future will look quite different from the past in terms of the skills needed and the skills valued in a way.
Yeah, and again, I think there's a bit of a throwback in this industry because so many people who work in the maritime industry on the shore side started their lives, or think they ought to have started their lives, at sea. And the nature of going away to sea for many months and so on was, again, probably seen traditionally as something that only men would do. Again, why? Why does someone have to have spent 6 or 9 months at sea in order to be a pilot on one river? And that's a direct maritime job. Why does someone need to have gone to sea in order to manage a crew looking after a set of warehouses? They don't.
Yeah. I think certainly the cultural shift that is needed, that Lucy describes there, is something that you see all across the board. And I think we need to break down and stop looking at years of experience and start looking at skills, what's transferable, what's not, taking a chance as well, giving people an opportunity to try something based on what we think they have to offer with the skills they bring, not the track record of 10, 20 years doing something similar before that, because your talent pool is going to be so narrow if you're only drawing from those same traditional routes. So I definitely think the way we think about talent for the entire sector, that really needs to change for us to become a more competitive sector.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a relatively young, in terms of tenure, leadership team. One of them is absolutely rooted in the sector, trained as a maritime at sea, you know, et cetera, everybody else has had time in other industries, and for 3 of them who have joined in the last 3 years, this is the first time they've had a job in the maritime sector, and that's the FD, the chief executive, and the operations director. All brand new, and our incoming commercial director as well. She's come from something allied. She's come from oil and gas, but she hasn't come from maritime.
Interesting. So yeah, bringing everything, dragging the maritime sector into the 21st century.
No. No. Stop thinking of it like that. It's about enabling maritime to see that they will progress and develop if they embrace people with a wider pool of experience that may have been gained elsewhere. So instead of narrowly defining what makes you successful in maritime is the ability to hoist a sail or tell starboard from port, actually what makes you successful in maritime is what makes you successful in a number of other areas as well.
Oh, I will keep that in mind when I next say how maritime changes. It's not being dragged, it's being enabled. We have a question actually for you, Nikki, but I think, Lucy, this will be interesting for you also to look at. It suggests finding a mentor. And someone's asked, did you have a female mentor? Do you think it would make a difference having a female or a male mentor? And I think it'd be interesting to hear all our views on this. Nikki, do we start with you?
Yeah, of course. So I had a female mentor and she was absolutely superb, completely transformational in the way I was thinking at work. I don't think it mattered that she was female. I think it could have been anyone. And if I had the opportunity to have a mentor that was as good as her again, I wouldn't care if they were male or female. I think what's important is having the right person for you and just having a mentor, full stop. If you've never experienced it, I cannot recommend it more highly, because I think it really helps how you have a sense of perspective and focus on certain issues, because it's some quality time for you to think differently, which it's hard to find when you're in a busy role and wrapped up in the day-to-day. So to answer the question, it was a female mentor, but I don't think that was the significant point. It was about the strength of the mentor that was important.
And did you have a structure for mentoring in your organization? Or is it something that you kind of set up? Was it more informal?
So we started with our leadership team and we cascaded down from there. So then all of our managers had access to our mentoring scheme, and it was so popular that we then cascaded it further, and anybody who wanted a mentoring opportunity could have it. And it just became so ingrained in what we were doing because we were seeing such great results from it. So we did approach it from top down, but I think it's something that you shouldn't make exclusive and just to your leadership team. I think whoever you are, you can benefit from having that opportunity.
I completely agree. What about you, Lucy? Would you be able to have a view? Do you have a view on that? I mean, she had a female mentor, yeah.
So I've never had a formal mentor, but I have been a mentor in a formal structure for other people. But and in fact, it was only when I became a mentor for someone else under a formal scheme, I realized I'd been informally using and abusing people for years as mentors and never probably given them the credit for that. But I talk about, I think every opportunity, let me give you a really good example. I became the chair of an organization, the first chairmanship I had back in 2003. And so I was just over 30 at the time. And there was a sort of president above me, and he took me out for lunch at the House of Lords, which was lovely. And if you're the guest, if you're the guest, there's no prices on the guests menu at the House of Lords. So have the expensive stuff, or work out what the expensive stuff is. And I went into that, and I was told by my predecessor, he's terribly busy. You know, he'll give you a nice lunch, and he's terribly busy, so don't trouble him. And during the lunch, and this is a guy who's now dead, Richard Home. Richard said to me, "What can I do for you while you chair this organization?" So I thought, right, I'm just going to be bold. I said, every 6 weeks, I'd like to come and have breakfast with you. Just take an hour of your time, and if I could pick your brains. And he said, absolutely, you can have that commitment, but you have to have thought about what you want to talk to me about before you come. Otherwise, it's a waste of both our times. Now, that would now be described as formal mentoring. It wasn't at the time. It was simply, well, I just grabbed that with both hands because I knew I could learn something from him. And also look around you. Who's doing things well and who's doing things badly? Reflect on them. Go and have a conversation. You don't have to have one. I can see it benefits certain people where that works. And if you've never had it before and the discipline, I can absolutely see that. But if that's not available, stop going, oh, woe is me. Just go and grab one. Go and find someone who you admire or respect and ask. Most people will give you a cup of coffee. Most people will spend that bit of time. And if you do it through questions. The other thing, just to round that off, we have used mentoring selectively across the port, but we're getting more systematic. But what we're doing is reverse mentoring. Yeah. So it's no accident that our graduates had time with our chief executive on their second day in their job. They are reverse mentoring their managers. And that speaks to the point that I think you've been trying to pick at, Monica, which is about changing maritime. Yeah. We think our managers will learn as much from our graduates as our graduates will from our managers. And we've set in our managers' appraisals, the feedback from their graduates is going to be one of their objectives, not the other way around.
I think that's a fabulous spin on it, Lucy, and it's definitely a view I share, that they have as much to learn as the graduates do.
I'm so inspired by, students or just graduates I meet nowadays. They've studied or learned in a different way to at least how I learn. So I feel I learn so much from them. I mean, there's so many things. They've grown up in a different world, access to technology. We can run rings around any of us in terms of access.
Yeah,
So
I remember her being lucky enough once to meet Douglas Hurd, the former Foreign Secretary, and he's still alive, but at the time he was in his early 80s, and he spent 4 days with a group of people that largely in their late 20s and 30s at a conference, and somebody had the audacity, it wasn't me actually, to say, so how why have you chosen to spend 4 days with a bunch of, and he said, as you get older, it's more and more important to spend time with people who are younger than you, because that's how you learn. Yeah. And I couldn't agree more.
I think the most people I've been most impressed with are the ones, at least when I was a young lawyer, who would come and spend time and hang out with you, because as you say, they learn from finding out what's happening on the ground. So I do agree with that. But I would also like to point out, I mean, both of you mentioned formal and informal mentoring. And I speak to a lot of people about mentoring. And one of the things that people are very scared about mentoring is they all think of it in a very formal way, or what am I going to ask, or how can I mentor? And I just wanted to mention that don't think of mentoring as something very scary or out there or different. I think both of you have pointed that out anyway. Find someone you like and just say, can I have a cup of coffee? And can I have a cup of coffee more regularly? And don't worry too much about what you're asking. You can ask very simple questions, and you can just ask. I found mentoring one of the best things I did, because sometimes, like you said, it just opens your mind to a different way of thinking from someone in your industry or outside your industry who gives you a different perspective.
Yeah, I don't think we should place too much emphasis on the name. If you called it a conversation, exactly, it seems so much less daunting and more possible. And that's all it is at the end of the day. It's a conversation between two people. So whether it's formal, informal, regular or not, this is why it's so important to network, because you can have so many more of those conversations and pick up little nuggets from different people, and people have as much to learn from you as you do from them. So the more you get out there, the better it is for everyone.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. The mentor gets as much. So some of your members who are established in their roles, I think they will gain by being a mentor for someone else, if you want to call it that. I think the other thing as well that I think is absolutely crucial that we haven't touched on at all is you do need to know yourself. You absolutely need to keep focused on being self-aware, because everyone else can see you for who you are. So unless you are prepared to be honest with yourself, it doesn't matter how many mentors or coaching sessions or development things or appraisals or anything you ever have, if you're not listening and you're not reflecting, or whatever learning is for you, it might be experiential learning, it might be reading, it might be conversation, whatever it is, you have to have a passion for that self-improvement, self-awareness bit, because otherwise you will bang on and you will keep complaining about the system and the structure and the environment, rather than trying to say, do you know what? It's easier to change myself and to learn to tunnel or build a rope ladder, rather than keep banging my head against the wall. And that's maybe why I don't feel I've ever had prejudice, is because actually, if I've spotted a brick wall, I recommend learning to spot brick walls and avoid them. Go and dig a tunnel, go and walk around the end, go and get a rope ladder, go and choose somewhere else.
Get someone to help you over.
Exactly. And maybe in time that brick wall will fall away. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. Maybe actually it's you that has to change, not the wall.
I love the simile of a rope ladder. I'm going to use it a lot more going forward. But Karina James says something lovely. She says, I've been mentored by so many people and they haven't even realized it. So
yeah,
maybe sometimes all you need to be is just be yourself, and you're mentoring other people because they learn from your integrity or your work ethic or your way of being. Are you both? So you said you've mentored before. Nikki, you said you've been mentored, but have you also mentored? Have you been on the other end of the scale?
Yeah, I've done both, and I think you stand to learn a lot on both sides of it. And I also felt that having got so much from being mentored, it was the right thing for me to do to now mentor someone else and give something back. And I have a new mentor at the moment. I think it's good to mix it up. You know, don't just stick with the same person, because you've got something new to learn from different people. So yes, I have a new one at the moment. Only had a couple of sessions, but really enjoying it so far.
Yeah, pay forward. It's not paying back, it's paying forward. The more you give away, the more you will receive. The more you share, the more you will receive. Not necessarily immediately, but you will benefit always. I genuinely don't think there's any such thing as altruism. There's always some enlightened self-interest with nearly everything that you do, because you're a human being. So just relax into it, but be generous. Be generous. You don't lose anything by sharing your insight. You don't lose anything at all. You only stand to gain by being asked to think, or asked to feel, or asked to respond, because it's another experience. It's another opportunity to be curious, or to wonder, or to explore, or hear someone else's perspective, all of which sheds light. If you hoard everything, you'll be a very embittered, very narrow, and probably frustrated person, in my view.
Karina totally agrees with you, but I'm not quite sure which part of that. I suspect all of it. She agrees with I do, at least.
I'll take any. I'll take any.
It's like teaching, isn't it? I think the teacher learns more when teaching than the students do. At least I always find when I do lectures, I've learned more. I don't know what my students have learned, but I've always learned a lot when I've given a lecture. So I feel like mentoring is a bit like that. You learn so much about yourself also when you mentor and when you're a mentee, both ways.
And I think the other bit that, again, Nikki alluded to earlier, is you can learn from absolutely anybody. So the fact that my chief exec said he was thinking differently after the graduates have been with us literally for one day, but they're new, so they see things in a different way from the way he does and the way I would. And that's why I, again, agree with Nikki. There's scope for formal mentoring, but don't get hung up on it. Just listen to what other people have to say. Why? And ask yourself, why are they seeing the world in that way? Why are they describing that issue in that way? What's going on? And as a leader, my job is to take the barriers away. So if they're telling me they can't do something, or something's stopping them from, or whatever, my job is to try and enable. That's all leaders do, in my view. They just try and enable others to be everything they can be. So you have to listen to find out, where are the barriers? Where are the things that are getting in the way? And that's why I have a bit of a problem, personally, with the idea that all problems are structural, and all you have to do is have a 50% quota for women, or a 12% quota for the under 25s, and it'll all be resolved. Actually, that won't work. Because if people still aren't listening and people aren't asking questions, it doesn't matter how many quotas you have, you're not going to make change.
Sorry, I just wanted to go back, because Karina has come back and she says she agrees with everything you said. Being transparent, generous with advice, everything. So she has clarified that she works with you all the way through, or she agrees with you all the way through. Sorry, I think that's been fascinating to hear your views on everything. We have 5 minutes left still, and I thought we could. Oh, there's another question. I was going to ask if you have questions to do reach out. In terms of attracting new talent, do you run any open days where students, or generally people interested in the maritime industry, can attend and learn a bit more about the operation of ports?
The short answer would be yes. We do all sorts of things. Aimed at different levels as well. So something that we found really successful a couple of years ago was using the teaching resources that the Institute of Chartered Shipbrokers created. It was a 6 set of lessons, and we took it to all of the primary schools within a 3-mile radius of the ports, so they could learn about shipping, learn about the importance of it, and it culminated in lesson 6 being a trip to your local port, so that you could actually see what you'd been learning about and put it into context. So that's something that we've done with primary school students. We run competitions with secondary school students. We get them in for work experience, careers fairs. We now do a lot on social media and webinars. You know, there's so many different ways of reaching people, and I think our emphasis has changed. It's not so much about just getting people through the door for an open day, but it's about reaching people on lots of different platforms, because we want to be drawing talent from all over the place. So the more we share what we do and the opportunities that we have, the more we'll be able to reach people.
Yeah, and we have the same approach, and one slight twist for us is we have some very impoverished communities in the northeast, many of which are actually very close to the port operations on either side of the river. So actually, before we even get to the stage of being able to do lessons and stuff, crudely, we've been sponsoring breakfast clubs so that kids are just in school, so that they're fit and healthy enough to go to school. And then it might be a member of staff does reading. One of our colleagues does reading with them to show them what reading's like. So you have to pitch it according to the audience that you're dealing with. And for us, again, it's enlightened self-interest. These are the kids who will be our workforce in 20, 25 years' time. Over a third of my workforce will retire in the next 15 years. A third. So I have to have, as a minimum, absolute minimum, at least 100 capable people within the next 15 years at skills we'll need in 15 years' time and running up to that. So it's enlightened self-interest to do this stuff.
Definitely. And I mean, where we are, because we're on the south coast, we can recruit from the north, the east and the west, but there's no one south of us. So we have to think beyond our immediate geography, and we have to be thinking about how do we reach people who don't even know what a port is because they don't have one on their doorstep, but they're going to work in one. You know, it's reaching the skills of tomorrow.
Yeah. I think what people have also seen is that even if you have a port on your doorstep, most people don't even know about their existence or the fact that they can apply there. So yeah, it is beyond just more than your doorstep.
And interestingly, yesterday morning at 11 o'clock on BBC One, Dom Does It. Apparently it's a program where a guy goes and does it. Anyway, he spent 2 days with us at the port, and you can now have it on YouTube or whatever. I knew nothing about it. I was just told. And he was a crane driver, a warehouseman, etc. And so that was on the telly. I was doing my early morning walk. There were 2 people ahead of me in the little river there where I go for a walk, and I heard them talking about the program. I practically skipped home. I didn't say a word, but I practically skipped home. There were 2 people, and one was going, I never knew all this fuel came in through the port. I never knew that's where I got my tea from. You think, yes. So you've just got to keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it.
Dom Does It. If we knew we'd get a little snippet of it today, but we didn't know.
I'll get the link for you, so I'll get the link so you can watch it.
Dom Digs In. I did see it.
Is that what it's called? Dom Digs In.
We're familiar with Dom. He also came to Shoreham, and he has a way of humanising what's going on and making something that, or demystifying it really. He just makes it so straightforward and accessible. Really worth watch, definitely.
Oh, that sounds lovely. So that's what we're all going to get off this webinar and go. So that's perfect. I did have a list of questions, a further list of questions asking you about your personal hobbies, because Lucy, you love chainsawing, and I was so curious to ask you about your chainsawing life. But maybe we have to keep that for seminar 2 or webinar 2.
I think so. Seminar 2.
I feel like I have a lot to learn from your chainsawing life, but it was so delightful. I was wondering whether we'd be able to chat for 20 minutes. It's been an hour, and I haven't even realized where the time has gone. Thank you so much for taking the time to reach out to us, to talk to everybody who's listening in. You're live on YouTube, so you're a broadcast celebrity now, Lucy and Nikki. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, SPNL. Thank you, WISTA UK. My name is Monica. I'm a senior lawyer at GARD. I've been in maritime for many years, and it's so exciting for me to meet so many women in the industry. When I first started coming into the industry, there was hardly anyone I'd meet other than my dad's friends. So now I have my own friends, and so many of them are women. So thank you, everyone. I hope you join us next time. Keep seeing us on SPNL and WISTA UK.
Thank you, Monica.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.